one of the most important conversations we have with the founding team. They could have the best idea in the world, but if they are not thinking towards exit, then they're most likely not ready for a fund investment, at least from us. When I started out fundraising, that was my first time ever raising money. And so it felt very uncomfortable initially for me. And I was like, it felt like a little bit like begging, let's be honest. And then as soon as I changed like my mindset, everything shifted for me.
That's Laurel Mintz, and she is not your typical VC. At just 26, she was thrown into the fire, taking over her father's Bassett Furniture business and managing 60 people. What followed? A bold pivot into entrepreneurship, 16 years of building Elevate My Brand into a marketing force, and now rewriting the rules of venture capital with Fabric VC. Fabric is a US-based seed fund investing in consumer tech and future-off companies, leveraging Laurel's operator edge from scaling hundreds of diverse-led brands, 39% of which went on to raise capital. She's turning marketing into her deal-making superpower, using proprietary diligence tech and brand-building playbooks to find and fund the next generation of breakout companies. In this episode, we go deep: her first LP check, the moment she knew she was built to be a GP, and why a marketing edge is key in building today. Enjoy! How's the ABC life treating you lately?
I'm great. Yes. You're always closing, you're always raising, you're always looking at portfolio companies. I think it was a tough year for a lot of people, but we persist. As you know, this is the business. So we have 11 current portfolio companies, which we just started deploying this year. So I'm pretty excited about that.
So a lot has happened since, but of course, not everybody knows Laurel the way that I do. We have very, very similar backgrounds where my baptism by fire was because my father unfortunately passed on and I was working through his business. And that was really my baptism through fire of business school. And you sort of did the same with Bassett Furniture. Tell us a little bit about that chapter, because I think that's really where your journey into business starts, and then how that brought you into the decision of, look, I gotta be a GP. I am a money manager, and that's what I have to be doing now.
Yeah, I do know we have such a similar background. That's why we have such love for each other, because we're like, we feel each other's pain so deeply in this process. But to your point, I started out as a corporate M&A attorney. I have an MBA in digital marketing as well. And I was practicing for a very short while. And then my dad got sick. He did survive. So I feel very, very lucky in that. But I ended up having to step in to take over his interest in the Bassett Furniture brand. He was the West Coast president. So at 26, I was interim CEO of that company for 3 years, which was wild. And really, that's what taught me that I was an entrepreneur. I launched my first company, which is the digital and experiential marketing agency, Elevate My Brand, shortly thereafter. That's now been around for 16 years. I can't freaking believe that. I know. Most well known there for the Squishmallows brand, launching and expanding them into the cultural zeitgeist and then selling them to private equity shortly thereafter. And then to your point again, Fabric is the spinoff of that agency. So it was a natural next step, although I don't know if I knew it at the time.
I know we brush over it, but tell me a little bit about, a crucible moment in being that 26-year-old and managing, 60 overheads at that point in time that brought you to wanting to take the marketing spin actually in consulting. Like, that's a very specific angle.
I was obviously not interested in the furniture industry. That was never the direction I ever thought my life would go. But in running that company, I realized that I really was an entrepreneur. And I started applying for those big law firm jobs, those big 6-figure jobs, and getting these offers, which should have made me deliriously happy. And instead, I was getting like heartburn and nausea. I was like viscerally ill from the idea of going back into that direction of life. And so I just started consulting. Like, people would bring ideas and concepts to me, mostly in the consumer space, because they knew that I had the ability to build business models and marketing models and that I had the legal background. And so about a year went by and I realized that I had a slew of really exciting clients and that was really a career. At the time, I didn't really know any consultants. Entrepreneurship wasn't as sexy a title as it is now. But that's really, I opened my eyes a year later and I was like, got it. This is actually a business model that I can execute against. And if I'm going to do that, I need to play at a bigger scale. And that's when I did my branding and marketing work around the Elevate My Brand concept and started hiring and training team and building the actual company from there.
16 years in, what has changed in the way that you do your business with Elevate Your Brand?
Well, I think when you're an entrepreneur that's been around that long, you've seen the highs and lows. So I would say a few things. One, making sure that I can work on the business, not in the business, making sure I have the right team in place and trusting in them to really lead the different categories for our clients. So I'm very lucky to have hired and trained the right team. We did an ESOP actually when I started moving into the fund side. And so now my team on the agency side has the opportunity to also be owners, which I think has been really impactful. So I think making sure you have the right team in the right seats is kind of like best practice. And then knowing that life is going to be and business is going to be an ebb and flow. So might have a down year one year, an up year the next year. If you can stay equanimous about your emotions around your business, I think that's one of the most important lessons in entrepreneurship.
You mentioned early on when we were having conversations that part of what led you to think about yourself as an investor was you actually invested in a common friend pretty early on, Jesse Draper, in Halogen Ventures, who of course comes from the Draper family. Tell us a little bit about thinking through yourself first as an LP and what made you decide that, the GP path is for you.
Yeah, I had a very interesting money journey, I would say. When I started making real money at the agency, I realized that my parents, for good or for bad, they taught me a lot of great things. Money was not one of them. How to work money, how to make money, make money. That was not part of our innate dialogue. And so when I started making money, I realized that I needed to create a better narrative and educate myself more on what that would look like for a brighter future. So I joined a women's investment group. I was the youngest person by about 10 years, and I would just sit there and they would say these big words and I would just take notes and then go home and Google them. And I'd be like, oh, that makes sense. I get that. And so my very first investment was actually an LP position that they brought to me. And I remember coming home and saying to my husband, I know I haven't been doing this for very long, but I really know that we need to do this deal. And I'm very excited to say that we're going to be exiting that position 10, almost 11 years later at about an 8X. So that's really exciting. And that's where I kind of got the chutzpah, as we say, to continue down that path. Jesse had brought us in to support her in terms of vetting some of her consumer deals, because that's what we really knew on the agency side. And then it just made sense for us to come in as LPs in her fund too. And I'm super proud to say that when we started conceptualizing the fund, she was one of my first calls. And I said, Jesse, I think I'm going to run a venture fund. What do you think? Is that so wild? She goes, yeah, I'm in. Here's a check. Go raise a fund. I'm sitting on your board. We need more women like you, in this space. And I feel really proud to have had someone like her who is, frankly, venture royalty backing me and supporting me in this mission. So that's kind of how that narrative arc happened. And now we're in 3 funds and get to support these amazing businesses in a completely new and differentiated way.
So I want to take this in 2 ways. One is, as a LP investor, what do you know now that you wish you knew earlier for those tuning in and are wanting to expand their LP interests?
Yeah, I would say, and I say this all the time, it's an age and stage and time and place investment. When you're investing as an LP in a fund, I think most people understand that it's a high risk, high reward position, but you don't really want to be thinking about it past the age of like 70, I would say, unless you're doing it on behalf of your children, because you're trying to take lower risks at that point. Hopefully you have a long lifespan ahead of you, but you never know. And then I always tell folks, because we're super proud that a lot of our LPs are first time investors. And I always tell them, you've got to have your foundation first, your 401k, your Roth, your public markets, your real estate play. Like that is the foundation of a solid investment strategy. And until those are really where they need to be, we're not ready for a conversation yet. And sometimes it's a little offensive, but I think it's the smartest approach. And then I would say the last piece is, I love the idea of angel investing in terms of understanding the process and how to kind of vet and how to go through the diligence pieces and documentation and all of that. But if that one company fails, you're SOL. You're done. So I've been really bullish on telling people, make a small angel investment to understand the process. And then I would really recommend if that is the world you want to invest in, do it through a venture vehicle because you can hedge against a downside.
Now that you are starting on your journey as a GP, right? So we're what, year one, year two into it of a 10 plus one plus one. Let's see how it goes, right? Depending on the venture cycle. Where do you see Fabric VC and why Fabric in the first place?
Fabric came very naturally. I'm a marketing girly, so I was sitting with three or four of my first board members, and we were just talking, and one of them said, this is really about you're building the fabric of the future. And I said, whoa, 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 what did you just say? Repeat yourself. She goes, I said, you're building the fabric of the future. I said, that's the name. And luckily, the lawyer in me looked it up on the USPTO, was available. So I grabbed it. And so that's why the term fabric. But to your earlier question, we're really building a platform here. This is my proof of concept vehicle. I wanted to ensure that this was what I wanted the next 10, 20 years of my life to look like, because I'm so used to being an operator. I didn't know if I was going to really appreciate and enjoy being a GP. Turns out I'm absolutely built for this. Like, this is the confluence of my education, experience, network, marketing expertise. It is the perfect next step for me. But we're building this as a bigger platform. Like, this is the proof of concept, but the goal is $500 million to $1 billion of assets under management, because when we have that much to deploy, we will be undeniable. The returns will be undeniable. And that's really what we're proving out with this first proof of concept fund.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the thinking behind and how has that evolved in your process of building the fund? Where is Fabric headed in terms of being the leader in the consumer space?
Yeah, we're focused in consumer tech and the future of health, future of fintech categories. Future of is a pretty wide aperture by intention, so we can cherry pick the deals that we see, which are vast. Everyone's got their hand out right now, as I'm sure you know, because not a lot of people are deploying currently, which puts us in a unique position. But I would say, when I started going down the rabbit hole of what our thesis should look like, I realized that of the 400 and some odd companies we'd worked with, over half of those had been diverse led, and 40% of those companies had raised capital. So we already had this kind of flywheel of startup, raise, exit modeled in our current network. So I thought, what if I just doubled down in that model and perspective? And I saw that 2%. I was like, well, that's really. And for those that don't know, obviously 2% of GPs are women, less than 2% of all venture funding goes to diverse founders. But let's be very clear, like, I'm a capitalist first, right? Like, so I want to do good and do well. So that 2%, it couldn't just stop there. I kept digging and I saw the 25% number, which most people don't know, which is that when diverse founders do receive funding, they return on average at a 25% higher return rate. And that's when like the light bulbs went off and I was like, got it. I can do good and do well. And if I can prove that investing in diverse founders isn't a charity, it's a business model, then I think that we can, again, do good and do well for us and create a brighter future for these founders.
Future off, as you said, that the aperture is pretty wide. How do you decide on a good deal? I mean, how have the markets informed where you're betting on the future these days?
Well, we were talking a little bit in the pre-show about AI and how that conversation is like so ubiquitous right now. And honestly, we get pitched it literally every day. And I like to put founders on their heels and I lean into the conversation. I'm like, so do you actually have this tool built, or do you just have like a little talking monkey in a closet putting data into a spreadsheet? And they kind of like balk at that. And because the truth is, and I'm sure you are very well aware of this, is so many of these companies haven't built anything. They're just pitching it because they think it's the next sexy thing, just like the metaverse was a few years ago. And also, a lot of these, I would say, majority of these companies don't need to build anything. They need to buy the existing platforms and maybe layer something on top of it. So I'm very hesitant about the AI conversation. I do think it's going to fundamentally change our lives in every category, but I just hate when founders come in and they're like so on trend. That to me maybe is an indicator that they don't have this longevity that we're looking for in founders. We have been seeing these companies for 16 years. I've probably looked at, oh my God, 10,000 companies, I would say. Talk about being an expert, right? We're just now refocusing in terms of deploying capital as opposed to just focusing on the marketing conversation. So given our background and expertise and our very unique diligence process, we're able to kind of source, vet, and deploy capital accordingly.
I know you are building a little bit of a unique platform there. And also, I guess in terms of the thesis, right? I mean, dime a dozen. Everyone says they're investing in the future of consumer health, right? Tech in general, and it's pretty agnostic. But how are you shaping the portfolio for Fabric VC? What does that look like? What are we betting on in terms of trends here?
First, in terms of diligence, I had this idea in the shower where I think you have all your best ideas, right? In the bathroom when you're not thinking or you're cooking. And I was in the shower and I was thinking, God, if I'm going to do this, I need to be really differentiated because, again, to your point, there are a dime a dozen firms out there trying to do the kind of things that we're doing. And I had this moment of clarity where I was like, we've been using this listening software on the agency side for 10, 15 years, best in class marketing software. What if I use it in a different application? Meaning, what if I apply it as a layer of diligence, a secondary layer of diligence on the portfolio companies to help us pick better winners? And we started executing against that. And basically, what it looks like for those who are unfamiliar with marketing software, listening software, you get to plug into these companies. And then on our process, we ask them to tell us who their top like 3 to 5 direct or aspirational competitors are. The software runs from an omni-channel marketing perspective. So we're looking at their website traffic, any technical issues, their social channels, their content, everything and anything under the marketing sun. So we're looking at not just them, but then we're looking at that 30,000 foot view of what's happening with their competitors. And what that tells us, Sarah, is a few things. One, are their numbers real or are they full of which a lot of these founders are? Two, how far are they from their direct competitors, which tells us if our check's really going to meaningfully close the gap for them. So that second layer of diligence, I think, has been really helpful in terms of pitching us and differentiating us as a fund. And more than that, really, it's been helping us to pick better winners. Because what we then do is see, do we have expertise within this category? Do we think we can add our marketing special sauce, not just to spot winners, but truly make winners? And on about a quarter of the deals that we write cash checks to, we match with sweat equity on the agency side, which provides immediate upside for our LPs in terms of doubling the equity in that particular company with no additional financial commitment on their behalf because the agency is an LP in the fund. So it's a little bit more complex than a typical fund model, I would say, but we believe that the returns analysis are going to be, really, really incredible. And we're already seeing it. We're proving it against the thesis. Of the 11 companies we currently have, 3 have or are currently raising their Series A, and that's in just 12 months.
What was surprising in that listening tool that came back that now has showcased to be an absolute business case?
I think the surprising thing we see across the board is that there's kind of 2 buckets, right? There's companies that really are thoughtful about their marketing and they understand the value set there and how that can help them be better winners. And what we know on especially the consumer tech side is up to 80% of use of funds when these companies raise is used in marketing. So if we can solve for that early and often and also make them not have to pour out capital immediately after their raise, we can keep these companies alive longer. That one set of founders that really understand the marketing conversation. Then there's the other set of founders who understand that it's something that they need to be thinking about, but they're far more technical or they're really operationally focused. And marketing is not something that they have really had top of mind. I find that to be especially the case in our healthcare future of workspace founders. They tend to be more technically focused. And so those have been the companies that, surprising to me, have had the need more for us to come in and support them. We just made most of these investments, so they're all my children. But I would say one that we're really excited about and we have doubled down on is a company called Active Armor. They do 3D printed custom casting at hospital systems. So you go in, you've got a fracture, a sprain, really any part of your body. And they have this technology that allows these hospital systems to live 3D print these incredible casts. Not only are they super cool looking, which is just an added bonus, but they're antimicrobial, antibacterial, and fully submergible. So I don't know, Sarah, have you ever broken a bone?
I have actually. I've got a pretty nasty one that you can even see on camera here.
So imagine a better for you cast where kids and adults both can actually go in the water and bathe and really have a better lifestyle, even with a broken or sprained appendage. What's exciting about that company, again, very super technical founder, not such a great marketer, but that's totally fine. Like, that's not a deal breaker for us, obviously. So we were able to come in and really polish all of her marketing channels, fix a lot of technical issues. And I'm super proud to say that in the last 6 months, she was able to contract with the US Army on a land and expand model to support our soldiers. So that's going to be a really exciting company to watch.
I know healthcare, it's a lot of personalization, of course, going digital and trying to manage the regulation around that. But what are you seeing here in terms of where consumer health and the other spaces that you are now looking into are going to grow into?
In consumer land, we do more consumer tech. I really like consumer on the marketing side because it's really a fun market to play in. But on the investment side, I do think it's really splintered right now. I don't think that there is a singular lane of focus. And so we prefer to make investments in consumer brands with some sort of tech moat or some sort of IP protection around it. So I think what we're going to see at some point, hopefully now that the M&A markets are opening back up and the IPO markets are opening up again, that splintering in consumer is going to kind of like regel, and that we're going to see a real focus in these different categories specific to consumer. I also think the conversation, again, not a new conversation, is still around two pieces: influencer, because people buy from people that they know, like, and trust, and personalization, right? And I do believe that AI is really supporting the personalization conversation and allowing us to really focus in and target. I actually had an email that came in to me from one of our portfolio companies that was like, we saw that you bought this, you'd be really interested in this. And it was completely, the entire email was talking directly to me, which I'd never seen it quite that personalized. Where you always, get the, hey, Laurel, we've got this deal for you kind of thing. But I've never seen it like so personalized. So I think we're going to continue to see a leaning in on personalization.
Remind me, in terms of your geographies of interest, this is a US focused fund, right?
US for now. I think in Fund 2 and certainly in Fund 3, we're going to go into more emerging markets. We just don't have our tentacles there yet. So we're not ready.
And of course, you are in the process of closing a little bit more. And I think this is an important part of strategy, right? Where you were able to say, all right, I'm going to close this amount. Let's get going. Let's get the proof of concept out. I'm sure it was challenging, but how did you sort of put that piece together in terms of where you were going to build your firm here?
The narrative had to shift, right? When I started out fundraising, that was my first time ever raising money. And so it felt very uncomfortable initially for me. And I was like, it felt like a little bit like begging, let's be honest. And then as soon as I changed like my mindset and I flipped the script and I was like, this is just another marketing vehicle and this is an opportunity. And if I can just re-engage my prospective LPs and understand that this is opportunistic more than anything. This isn't me begging for anything. This is me giving them a fantastic opportunity given our expertise, our differentiation, our access, and our perspective. Everything's shifted for me. And then I was like, oh God, this is a market. Like, I need to market the what out of myself and create those kind of inflection points. We're going to do a first close. We're going to hit a few million in that so that we can start to actually deploy. And that, again, from a marketing conversation, completely changes the narrative, because then you're not this pie in the sky concept of a fund. You're actually executing against your thesis. And so we've been pretty bullish on like, we're rolling, raise, rolling, deploy, so that we don't actually call our capital until we've got companies that we know and have already diligenced to deploy into. And I think our LPs really appreciate that as well. But leaning in on the marketing side, it seems like such a like duh moment because I'm a marketer at heart, but in a completely different vehicle like a fund, it wasn't in my initial thought process. Then I was like, oh yeah, this is what we do.
So when you look at the past year, right, where you've seen success and where you hadn't, what do you think the year has taught you in terms of this whole process of building a fund that I guess a lot of new fund managers should take heed on?
I am very clear when I have conversations with LPs. They're like, how can we help you? And I think most people are like, we would love to have you in the fund, blah, blah. I'm like, 3 ways, like very clear. Write a check, introduce us to folks who can write checks, or give us a platform where we can educate and empower people about the asset class. That's really been a surprising moment to me, Sarah, actually, in this year. I thought that the joy was going to be investing in these amazing founders, and it totally is. But the work in the work has actually been the education and empowerment around a lot of first-time LPs who never had a seat at this table. So we were doing a lot in terms of education and giving people a safe space to ask questions that they might not ask in a different room. So again, leaning in on the marketing conversation, we have a talk that we give pretty regularly now called Better Than a Birkin: How to Build a Legacy. Because I think especially women have a tendency to purchase couture or donate, and they don't understand the trickle down impact that investing and the investing mindset can actually have in their long-term wealth building.
I love that, better than a Birkin. I think you're picking on a point that we see a lot, in which women are generally comfortable. They've been doing philanthropic investments for a very long time, right? To think about it as a write-off, as charity. What needs to shift here for us to really leverage the great wealth transfer where women are going to be the primary beneficiaries? I mean, you're dealing with them. A lot of them are probably hopping on as new LPs.
It all comes down to education. They haven't been given a seat at the table. They need to take the blinders off too. Like, I always call people out. I do it in a nice way, and I think I have a bit more fun energy around the conversations around money, because let's face it, it can be a very uncomfortable conversation. And that's why we lean in on it with the education and fun components. And the Better Than a Birkin conversation is a perfect example of that. I think women have to understand the different vehicles that are out there, right? So if they're more comfortable investing, or rather donating, then there's vehicles like DAFs where they can make those donations and also invest and get the immediate tax benefit. So I think that there is more nuanced education that needs to happen. But I'm sure you would agree with this, Sarah, that the first and foremost piece of that is women and everyone needs to be talking more about money in general. I think that we have been so uncomfortable with those conversations. I was that way too, because my parents were like, oh, so tacky to talk about money. But I actually get such a kick out of it now. And you can still see, like, a lot of folks are really uncomfortable in those conversations. My hope is that after they're done talking to me, they just have a little bit more energy around it and they feel a little bit more empowered to ask the right questions, get in the room, have those conversations, and hopefully they can pay it forward. I always say, like, go talk to your friends about money over your cocktails, right? Stop talking about fashion. You can talk about fashion too. You know, I'm a fashion girly, but let's talk about more money. I think it's such an important conversation. I know you agree.
Yeah. What is a common misconception or a common question that's asked when you're in these rooms where you're having the serious conversation about money, and I guess leading up to why you should invest in my fund?
I think there's a lot of jargon and a lot of confusion around the jargon, a lot of fear, frankly, around the jargon. And because of that, the immediate response is no. And it's actually a psychological issue, right? We see this in marketing all the time. If you have different fonts on the same logo on different pieces of collateral, your brain immediately goes, oh, I can't relate those brands to each other. I'm just going to say no and not make a purchase. It's the same thing in investing land, right? So if your fear is leading you in the money conversations, you're likely not going to make an investment. So the questions I get a lot are, minimums and things like that. And I think that because we have a capital call structure, which also most folks I talk to don't realize. I mean, and not all funds are like this as well, Sarah, as you know, like some funds, it's like you're in and you've got to write that check and it's all in at that moment. But for us, because we wanted to build a bit more accessible of a fund, we have a capital call structure that allows folks to write a check, build the coffers, write a check, build the coffers. So it's not as much of a fear factor to write a six-figure check instantly. And I think that that has been a really huge eye opener for a lot of our investors.
So it sounds like marketing is definitely the value add that you bring as an expert yourself, having done this for 16 years and counting. What is your exit strategy plan for your portfolio? Is this something that, I know you're early stage, really early, but are you thinking about that actively? Where do you see, I guess, the energy from the different verticals that you're investing into moving towards? Are we seeing more M&As, more IPOs? Are you in that mix as well and actively building intentionally there?
Absolutely. And personally, I'm seeing this as well because we, as a couple, we have a barbell approach to investing. So we've got a few early stage, a few late stage, so we can kind of see what's happening on both sides of the market. I think we talked a little bit about this earlier. I do see the M&A markets opening a bit, softening, IPO markets, same thing. And I think that that is really going to be the continued trend. But in terms of exit strategy, we all know that venture is a typical 10-year term. I think a lot of funds have extended that because of COVID. They're like kind of just starting to pick back up. And so some funds are 11, 12 years. I've seen some that are 13, which is a little bit painful. When we are looking to invest in a company, we want to make sure that they're thinking about an exit strategy, right? We have to be bullish and thoughtful about how we're going to return to our LPs. And it's one of the most important conversations we have with the founding team. They could have the best idea in the world, but if they are not thinking towards exit, then they're most likely not ready for fund investment, at least from us. I am a bleeding heart, but I'm also a capitalist again. And I want to make sure that we have an exit in mind. And that even if it's a little bit aggressive and maybe not as clearly executable as some of these founders think that they are, that they're at least in their mindset focused on what that exit or who those strategic buyers might look like.
Yeah, and so this, I guess, leads me nicely into the future, right? What are you betting on?
Myself?
Always important.
I am really hopeful for 2025. I think 2024 was a tough year for a lot of people. I'm super transparent about the conversation. And we saw it on the agency side as well. Like, we've been around for 16 years. As I said in the beginning of the conversation, there's an ebb and the flow to business and to every year that you see. This year was a soft year. I'm hoping next year will be a stronger year from an operational perspective and on the fund side. I think the election cycle was really stunting for a lot of people. And now that we're over that hump, and we're already seeing it actually, as soon as the election was over, people started writing checks again. In terms of what we are trend-wise watching for 2025 on the consumer side, I would say non-alc beverages are still really hot in the market. We haven't made an investment in that category yet. We had looked at one and didn't get an allocation in it, which I was very upset about because our check was too small for them. And that happens. But I think we're still pretty bullish on the non-alc market and looking for something in that category. I'm really excited about litigation tech. We've done one check in that category. I think markets who tend to be a little late to the game in terms of technology application, they're so ripe for disruption, right? So we made an investment in a company called Alphalit that I'm super excited about, and they use AI and ML to create meta ads at scale to attract wage and hour workers that aren't getting paid a fair wage. Those are the things that I'm excited about.
We've covered a lot of ground there. Was there anything else that you felt you needed to highlight as well, an area that we haven't touched on in this conversation?
I just think it's important for people to really put their money where their mouth is. And I think there's a lot of talk out there, both on the fund side and on the founder side and on the check writer side, on the allocator side, about wanting better returns. And what we are proving with investing in diverse founders is that alpha returns are not just possible, but they are more likely. So I would just say, get out there, write checks to funds, to founders, and to people that you really believe can provide alpha returns.
Okay. So rapid fire, we'll start with this because we talked a lot about this. This is probably the most used word in this 30 minutes. Money or power?
Power.
Ooh, fame or fortune?
Fortune.
Fill in the blank. Success is?
Success is being truly happy and not needing anything from anyone.
Failure is?
Not taking risk.
Not investment advice, but your favorite investing hack or tip?
Well, something that we do at the fund, we try and be the last check-in because then it's already been kind of pre-vetted.
What kind of leaders do you hire?
I hire and work with leaders who are technically savvy, who are exciting, and who I believe are solving a real life problem.
What is one thing anyone listening, a funder or founder, can do right now from a marketing perspective that's a no-brainer that everybody has to do?
Email marketing. I think so many people are scared to talk to their people, but if you create the right funnel, email marketing campaigns, and the right follow-up funnels, whenever someone says, I'm not the right fit, I'm like, that's great. If you could introduce us to one or two folks, and I ask them to name the people on the call, and then we send a copy paste to make it really easy. So again, make the follow-up easy. But email marketing, I think people are still sleeping on.
Yeah, so don't sleep on that one. And finally, what is your legacy going to be?
That's why I started Fabric, because I had already built a legacy company for my team at Elevate, but this is really how I feel like I'm going to leave the world a better place. I don't have children, but I want to make sure that when I'm gone, that I've made a positive impact and left the world a little bit better than it was when I was in it.
Yeah, love that. All right. Well, Laurel, thank you so much for your time and for improving the fabric of the world and the work that you do. We're so excited to see how you will continue to scale your impact. But finally, how can we find more about you if someone's interested to invest with you, of course, and to learn more about the fund? Where can we go?
fabricvc.com. We have links to everything there. We host quarterly pitch days. We have live events. We've really built out an incredible ecosystem. So come find us there or on all the socials.
Wonderful. And with that, Laurel Mintz, I hope to see you more in 2025.
Thanks so much, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
And thanks so much for tuning in this week. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow our socials on Sarah Chen Global to get the latest on the show. It would really help me out too if you enjoyed this to rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts and share your favorite episodes with a friend. I'm Sarah Chen-Spellings, and you've been listening to Billion Dollar Moves.